One of the things that we always come across is gaps. Okay, it's not a problem. It's not an issue of, oh, everything's terrible. It's a case of we've used a report pack. It's just what we needed it to do today, but we want it to do more tomorrow. Okay, remember, big data isn't about getting more data. It's about using what you have more effectively and getting more out of it, not bringing more in. Okay, so we've got this question that we wanted to work through that's been raised to us. And I think this is an ideal time to have a look and evaluate some of the things that we can do within Power BI that are simple enough for us as a business user. We're not heavyweight Power BI developers. We've probably dabbled a little bit in Excel. That's maybe about it. Hi, my name's Ross, the creator and founder of Geordie Consulting and Geordie Intelligence, the YouTube channel you're watching today. What I thought we'd look at is that first foray where we need to go do a little bit more than just a simple pivot table. We might want to build a report that just does a little bit more than we've got already there in our data set. And it's not a case of saying, oh, the data set wasn't built well. It's a case of saying the data set can do more. Our questions have triggered us to say, well, what about this? What about that? And then being able to funnel those back through, and we'll go to the point where we then say, hey, data team, can you fold this back into our data set, potentially even bringing in what we're going to do with it towards the end of it? And you'll see what I mean. So let's cut on over into Excel and see where we're going to start today. So here we are, Microsoft Excel, okay, simple enough. What I've had a question get asked really by somebody, okay, in terms of, hey guys, we've heard that Jesmond Parkrun's really popular and has lots of tourists coming. What's the rough what do we estimate the economic impact is of that parkrun and having that parkrun in Jesmond? How can we gauge how much revenue is roughly being generated for the city from that? Okay, and there's a multitude of reasons why we can't, but we could certainly have a try, finger in the air, give a rough indication, as long as we weren't coming around and saying this is to the pound or anything like that. And we were willing to say, look, there's a big margin of error, but we can kind of see, we can then also equate the same calculation to different events and see how they all stack up side by side. Okay. So where do we get started? The first thing is within Excel. Let's have a look in Excel. Can we do what we need to do? So if I go through to Excel and I go to data and I come through to get data, I'm going to go from Power BI. It'll give me my list of data sets that I've got available. And remember, as a business user today, so all I have is our Northeast Food Hygiene and our Parkrun Semantic Model. So I'm going to bring in a pivot table based on that. You see it's going to ask me to authenticate. I'm going to confirm that I am who I am, and I can then start. So firstly, let's see what we can do. So if we go in here, we've got first timers. So we could put that in as a value. Okay. And then we've also got our registered finishers. So one of the things I did was there are three options that you have in terms of when your run takes place. Did you get a PB? Are you a first timer? Or was it a case of you just had a normal run kind of thing? So I've put some measures in for there. I think we've got PB. Is it PB? Yeah, PB as well. Okay, so we'd be able to do what we're doing here and work it out against PBs as well. So we can see we've got first timers, we've got that. And we could then, we could do a percentage of those, couldn't we? But what we really want to do is see, well, if we click here and we say, well, let's bring in the design, sorry, pivot table analysis, we can bring in a slicer. We want the slicer to be, we want it to be on event name. So let's do a slicer on event name. So we can see this is going to come through, and we can then choose and we can say, well, actually what we're interested in is Jesmond. So we can click on that and we see, oh, right, okay, so we've got 16,000 first timers of 45,000. So that's quite a good indication. There's definitely something going on there. If we looked at Jubilee, which we know is another one, we can see, oh, that's a similar sort of number. You know, we're just kind of fingering in the air it roughly. See, so there is definitely more first timers. And what we mean by first timers is kind of that these people who are chasing an alphabet want to come through. So we could then look and we could say, well, can we bring in the event date for those? So we can just see, you know, roughly what's happening with these. Is there something, you know, have we got something? It's kind of the question, isn't it? So we're going to bring in, event, date, wasn't it? Okay, so calendar date in the rows, and we can see we've got something here for Lisa's, we've got something here for Jasmine Dean. So there's a lot already there, but what I really want to do is work out the percentage. And unfortunately, kind of with pivot tables, there's not really a great deal you can do. You know, we could turn around and get, if we put columns in here, we get the percentage of a parent total and things like that for it. But that's not going to help me necessarily, especially if I want to have values against these things as well. So what's the best way to do that? And the answer is to do it in Power BI Desktop. And there's something now in Power BI called visual calculations. So what are visual calculations and how are they going to help me? So remember what we've got, we've got a little table here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to here where I downloaded our template file. I'm just going to double click on our template file because we're going to create a new report. And of course it's going to open on the other screen. So I'll have to drag that over. If you see me looking over to the left and looking at the other screen, that's what I'm always doing. Okay, so we've got here, this is great. So let's see, shall we start with, what page are we going to use? Let's go with this one. Okay, I kind of like the look of this one. Okay, so I'm going to right click, duplicate this. This is going to be first timers. All right, so what we can do now is I want to put in a slicer. Okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I want to put a slicer in that's going to allow us to pick the event that we want. So I've picked local authority and event name. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to a slicer. And then as the slicer type, let's go right here. So the slicer settings, we're going to choose a drop down, and for the selectors, we're going to make it a single select. So we have to have something select is what this says, okay? So what I'm then going to do is we're going to put that here. Okay, so we've got, you could pick a local authority or you could pick an individual event. So we can drill into Newcastle and we can pick, say, Jasmine Dean. Okay, so just like we've done before. So we've got Jasmine Dean selected. So the first thing to do is let's bring in our dates. Okay, then we're going to put those in here, and then in dates we're going to have first timers, and then we want registered finishers. That is this one here. Okay, so we've got first timers, we've got registered, and we can see, all right, this is different. Okay, and we can even from here, we stretch that across there. We can see if we pick, let's say, Town Moor, we see there's a bigger difference, isn't there? There's less first timers at Town Moor. Okay, but is that the right way? Is that, you know, so we need something that's not going to be too dismissive of those numbers, don't we, as well? So we need something that's going to work with that. So what we can do is we can say, right, we've got these things here. What do we need to do? So what we can do now is we can say, right, I want to be able to work out what percentage is that. And the way we insert a visual calculation is from our chart that we've got, is we right click here and we can see we've got this option to insert a new visual calculation. And we can see these are the ones that are just available out of the box for you. And over time, hopefully this will keep being added to by Microsoft. What we also have is custom. So we're going to use custom just so you can see just how difficult it is to add these. I'm just going to give it a name. So it's going to be percent first time equals, So in Excel, in Power BI, we have a divide function. So really, if you, in case, to avoid divide by zero errors or anything like that, you have a divide function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say divide, which is the name of the function. It's really simple. And we're going to pick to use first timers, and you see it's recognized that I'm using a column, and it only gave me the option of using columns that are involved in this visual. So first timers by registered finishers. And then I'll say what we want is a 0, and we're going to close the brackets there. Hit enter. So we've now got a number there for it, but it's a number, it doesn't look good, it's a problem. So what do we need to do? We have in the format pane here, we have the ability, and I'm just going to type data in here just because it's easier. Under data format, we can pick % first time. This is saying it's decimal, and it's not. We want it to be, well, it is a decimal, isn't it? But we want it to be a percentage. And let's say we want no decimal places for it. Okay, we just want it as it is. Okay, and then I can zoom out. And you can see we've now got a percentage number there, which is what we want. So if we bring that and we place that on the secondary axis, we can see over time how it changes. And we know, of course, that initially those first few events, they're always going to be heavy with first timers, shall we say. So we could even go down the route saying, well, do you know what, we don't want to include the first route, but we're not going to go down this route. We're going to keep this. We've always said it's going to be kind of finger in the air. We're not going to be perfectly accurate with it. So that's Town Moor actually, so isn't it? So we can go back to Jesmond Dean. We can see again, we can see the initial drop, and then it kind of staggers along. And I think it's staying fairly even, isn't it, really? We have the high peaks that we have, where we've got an awful lot of tourists, and these rate back 10th of September, 2nd of September. Yeah, these are Great North Run weekends. So, which is to be expected. We've got a lot of influx of tourists. We've got a lot of people coming to do extra events. So we know we can validate what's happening with these. So that's going to be roughly, can we work out an economic benefit from it? So I'm going to minimize this a little bit, because what I wanted to do was put in here. So let's go with events held. I'm going to put that in there. Okay, and I'm just going to make that there. Let's just minimize that a little bit. Let's squeeze that up into there. Let's squeeze this up. What I'm also going to do, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with this, is I'm going to move, just to show you, I'm going to move these into the tooltips. Okay, so all we can see in the chart is the percentage first time. So we're going to move that to the main axis. Okay, so we've got this first time percentage, which again, this is a measure we didn't have before, and I haven't really had to write anything too complicated for it. Okay, I could choose to do some things around this. So we could, we've got data labels. Should we put some data labels on it? We can see that. We can also choose to, I want to change the line a bit, I think. Let's make the line, it's solid, that's fine. I want to make it smooth. Let's just smooth it off a bit. Let's make it a bit bigger. All right, because what I'm going to do last is I'm going to go to here and I'm going to remove the background for it. So we want something that's going to stand out a bit. That green does not stand out at all, does it? So we can say, right, underline. Where was I before? Color, we can pick a different color. Let's pick yellow. Okay, horrendous, I can see. But we could keep going, we could work through these. Okay, so we've got the events held, and I'm going to just drop that down to 20 and 10. Okay. 20 and 10, and then I'm going to remove the background, and then what I want to do is go Control-C, Control-V, Control-V. Okay, because what I want to do is, for here, we're going to change this to first timers. And here we're going to change this to registered finishers. Okay, so we can see we've got these, and what I want to do then is just remove these. No display units on that, no display units on that. We'll log a ticket to our data team, so can you put 1,000 separators in that one, and that's fine. Okay, so we've got something quickly and easily that we've built to do it. So now what we can do is we could say, right, we can assume from everything that's gone on, we're going to make some fag packet kind of calculations, aren't we? Okay, so we've got numbers here. We can assume a first timer's percentage from these, couldn't we? Okay, so from there we can say, right, well, what are we going to do? So we use secondary because we're going to have to create a new DAX measure for this, right? So I'll apologize. At this point, we're going to get a little bit complicated because we are going to write some DAX. So I'm going to right click on this and create new measure. Okay. Estimated economic benefit equals. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to assume per person spent. I'll tell you what, let's zoom in on this a bit because this is not looking good, is it? Okay. So how many pounds do we think people will spend who come to parkrun? Okay, so for the sake of it, let's say 10. Okay, now bear in mind this could be tourists, this could be people who are just traveling from a bit further away. 10 feels like it could be about right. I'm sure there's a whole calculation set that tourism people would say, well, this is it, okay? But that could be 10, it could be 100, it could be 1,000, but we can change it whenever we do, just with this measure. And at this point, it's in the measure. But if we went to the point of saying, right, we want to put this in properly, we'd probably put this in as a variable so that you could actually move it with a slicer. So you could actually pick, well, what do we reckon economically people are going to spend? Okay, so we've got that. And I'm going to say, well, VAR, what do we reckon that we need to be considering in terms of the adjustment? Okay. And the adjustment is sort of, well, we've said a percentage. So we had, 30%, 40% as our attendance. How much of that do we actually think is genuinely parkrun tourism, these alphabetiers or something like that, versus, do you know what, they're just people who've never done Jasmine Dean before, but they're local and they've just come to do Jasmine Dean. So that, well, we need to be sensible of that. So that's going to be a percentage. So we're going to say what? Let's say 0.5. Okay, so half of them, let's say. So half of people who are first timers, they're tourists, we're saying. And that's going to be used across the piece. Okay. And then what we need to do is we need to work out what are percentages. Okay, percent. So this is unfortunately where we're going to repeat. Well, not unfortunately, this is simple. So we're going to repeat roughly what we did before. Okay, but this time it's not as a measure in a visual calculation. We're going to divide first timers by registered finishers. And I'll put 0 again. Okay, so we've got that. And then what we need to do is we need to say, well, let's evaluate that. Let's put that together so that we actually work out what that is. So we're going to go VAR. Okay, and these variables in Power BI do make life much simpler because what we've got is we've got 3 areas here where we could say what we should do. So what we should do is we should do this, shouldn't we? So we're going to put this in first. So we're going to comment that out. And this is going to be variable, how much in pounds does the average person spend attending park? Okay. And again, it's based off this, the average, so not average person, average tourist. Okay. So we've got that. Then we've got here, which is going to be another variable. What percentage of our first timers should we assume are park runners? Are tourists. Because they're all park runners, aren't they? Are tourists. Okay. And then let's get calculation. What is the first timer percentage? And then we're going to determine amount. Estimate. Okay, so we're going to do this. I'm going to say eval, and this is going to equal my registered finishers. Okay, so we've got registered finishers again. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that by all of these. So we're going to multiply it by the person spend. We're going to multiply it by No, let's do this. Sorry, we need to do this, don't we? So we're going to open the brackets because we're going to multiply that by open brackets. And again, this is just me being me, and there are things where I go, I'm not sure about that, I don't like that. Percentage multiplied by adjustment, close brackets, and then I'm going to multiply that by the person spent. Okay, so we've done all that. Yeah, we've got all that. We could even turn around and say, well, we want to put that in brackets as well. Okay, so we want you to calculate that and then do that, because we want to make sure we've gone through. So we're saying, right, let's get that adjusted percentage. So we're going to say what our 33% multiplied by half. So it'll be what, 17%, something, not 17. Yeah, 17, yeah. Then multiply that by the registered finishers number, which will get us down to whatever the right number is for what we've got to. Because if we multiply it by the first times, obviously it'll be that, we multiply, yeah, okay. And then we're going to work out the per person spend. So hopefully we've got that all right. And then we want to return that because we want this to be able to come back to us. So the reason why we did the eval there was because what I wanted to do was to round. And the reason why I'm rounding is because I don't really want to be saying this is an exact number. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say -3 on that. And then you'll see what that does. Okay, so we've now got a number here. So if we close this, you can see we've got a number. We can now bring this onto here. 86,000. Okay, so let's change a few things with this. All right. So firstly, let's change the quiet value to be none. Let's go to our formatting here, where we've got our number here, and we're going to say this is actually currency. Let's switch this to be UK currency, and we want 0 decimal places. Okay, so we don't want to be saying, we don't want any pence in there. Okay, so we're sort of saying 83,000, roughly, economic benefit. Okay, again, I don't know. It's kind of a guesstimate. Is this right? Is it wrong? I don't know. But what we can do is we can say we've got that. We could put some heading at the top saying, you know, there's a lot of assumptions have gone into here. We can compare, so Denton Dean, we can look at Leazes Park, we can look at Town Moor, we could look at Newcastle as a whole, we could look at Gateshead, we could look at everything. Okay. So the same calculation will be applied regardless of what's being done. So it kind of gives a good indication. So I think it definitely is far from perfect. I'm not going to say this is perfect. This is great. Here we could go through, we could do more. So we could also then say, well, actually, let's actually put something together that's going to have everything. Okay, so this is going to be our table. Okay, so we can come through. Let's delete that. And let's put in year. Do that. Let's put that on here. So we want year to go as columns. We want local authority as rows, and we want name. Okay, so we've got this here, and then lastly, what we can do is we can bring this in, drop in estimated economic benefit, and then let's actually. That's not too bad, but let's shuffle some sizes around and do some things like that to make this look a bit better. So values, let's drop those down to 8. Might be able to get rid of 9. Okay, but we can see. So we've built something quickly, easily, pieced it together. It is very much kind of nothing I would take to the bank. There's nothing there to be, oh, this is great. But we can easily change things. We can modify it. So we could say, well, actually, we estimate people are going to spend, say, £25, but we're only going to have 20% of people, for example. And we can then see how that is reflected in the calculations here. We can change that to be 30%, for example. And we can see now that's all right, 2 million. So we can see we've got the ability here where we'd be able to explore this, expand it, work it out. We'd have to do more legwork. This is definitely not a complete piece of work, but as a starting point, I've now built something. We've put this into PowerPoint, sorry, into Power BI. You've seen how easy it is to take it from here to put it into PowerPoint. So I'm going to unhide these, unhide that. Potentially we'd do some more things on here, just, you know, tart it up a little bit. We could even bring through. So if we go back to our instructions page, I'm going to highlight this filter. I'm going to choose here, and I'm just going to paste it onto this page, put it there. And I'm going to do the same on this page. Actually, I don't think we'll put it on this. We'll leave it on here, okay? Because what this does, I'm going to hide here. I'm just going to hide the data dictionary as well this time, because I don't really want people to see it. Is it brings you to this page. So from here, we've got the options where we can choose things. So we could turn around and say, well, all we're really interested in is veterans, for example. So veterans are the older people. So potentially they're the ones who are going to really travel and bring in your economic benefit, as opposed to saying, well, kids potentially wouldn't count, would they? But again, for this, you might say, well, they've brought their kids, so, potentially their kids do count, but we could choose to Control-click, select the ones we want for these, and we can see everything updates accordingly. So we've got very good information flowing through into here that allows us to come through and determine what's actually happening. And for all it is still very much a first pass at this, it's not a first pass from no information. This is kind of some clear logic that's gone into this estimation, and we're being very broad with it. So, I think 72,000 is appropriate. Is it right? I don't know. These are things I don't know. And I don't think anybody would look at me and go, well, you've said 72,000, that's what it means. We would heavily caveat this, that we just don't know. We could say here, Newcastle City Council, potentially it's 290,000, the economic benefit that parkrun has brought into the city. But that's all based on this calculation. So, we could say, well, it's £5, straight away it drops down to 58. We could say let's say 70% of the people, it's up to 135,000. It's 10,000, it's 171. So we can work through and guesstimate where we would be. And what we would do is we say, well, what percentage of them do we think would want hotels? What's a hotel stay? Are they come just for parkrun, or are they coming for something else? Have they come for a concert, for a football match? But we're starting to be able to build something with this. And that's not taken me a long time to do. And remember, this started from just hey, how many finishes did we have last week? Report. To we're now being able to build or assess public health impact, now potentially economic benefit to a region from something. It's estimates. We're not saying these are perfect, but this is something that potentially we could not do without this data set. So I recently did a talk in Manchester where we talked a lot about lifecycle management of Power BI content. And this is one of the things that I've seen consistently with client after client after client, is that great Power BI content starts simple and expands. Okay, so we will start with something that's, we just need this little bit done. And then, well, because we've done this, what about? And it becomes easy to bring this together and keep adding to it. In terms of this data set that we're looking at now, the parkrun data set, it started as just a case of, hey, what's happening in Jesmond Dean? That was all I was interested in. And then it became, well, how do we compare to our local events? A bit of local rivalry, or I'm curious kind of thing, to then being, well, let's go wider afield, further afield, what can we do? Now we've got to the point that we're covering the whole of the Northeast economic environment. It becomes really clear that, well, that's the question, isn't it? Northeast Combined Authority, it's all about economic benefit. So the question would straight away be there, what is the economic benefit of parkrun to the Northeast Combined Authority? Are these figures 100% accurate? No, not in terms of economic benefit. In terms of running and how many people actually have come, registered their barcode, signed up. These are the facts. That's the fact that happened. The question would be, what's the economic benefit? What would be even more difficult would be then say, right, well, how do we gauge back that economic benefit to go further into it? So that's where we might want to look and say things like, is there a way we could push some of the where the parkruns are into the Northeast food hygiene data set so that we could actually then start to see. And that's then exactly where we see data set growth and expansion coming through. So it's not uncommon in a business where we'll say, we've got factories, we've got this, we've got that. The way you start to then look and say, well, this data set we've got here and this data set we've got there, actually the two, if we combine the two, we get something that's really powerful for us. Because it would be great to be able to understand how many cafes, how many restaurants are there within a 5-minute walk of a parkrun, within a radius of a parkrun. What is there a way that they get economic benefit from it? Can we show the economic benefit from one as a way of saying to another, hey, do you know what, could you give us a discount? These are traditional ways that businesses will work and evaluate and try and leverage their position and leverage data to benefit them. And we can see how that can be done. In terms of writing the DAX measures that we've done here, I hope you've seen it's not too challenging. Again, we've put in the comments into it so you can see, right, what's happening. The next step would be, if this is a case of saying, right, the way you've calculated this economic benefit is good, we want to put this into the main model so it can be used more. What I would need to do is be to copy that DAX statement that we've written, so that estimated economic benefit, and I would need to submit that to our data team to say, hey, can you guys move that into our main report pack? And they would go through whatever their internal approval process is, take it live. I would be told, I'd evaluate it, make sure that their numbers were meeting my numbers, just so that we knew everyone was okay. And then ultimately I would kind of delete my one from my version, because right now I've written this measure, just like I've written these visual calculations, and they only exist in that report that I've just created. They don't exist anywhere else in the business. So we need to make sure that they actually get out there. So I will publish this up. We will share this with my colleagues. I'd be able to put this into a PowerPoint and everyone would say, oh, wow, okay, I get it. And we could keep going and move further forward. And all of a sudden, I've now built 2 reports in Power BI. I've got Excel spreadsheets that are connected to the Power BI report. I can see what's going on with them. But my reports in Power BI are much easier to present to my management and show them what I'm seeing. Or if I'm a manager, it's really easy for me to understand what's going on with this, because it's a language that makes sense at the boardroom. Yeah? So I hope that's made sense. I hope you're inspired and think, well, okay, I've always thought that Power BI and the DAX side was just really complicated. And what you've shown me, it's not too difficult. Kind of a divide, I can do that. That's easy. That's the point. I want you to realize there's not a huge challenge with doing it. And the benefit of doing it in a secondary report or with a thin report is the hard work of building the data model, that's the hard work piece, is done. That's the hard part. That's what your data team do. That's what they bring to the table. What you have to do is work out, how can I leverage what they've done, maximize the benefit it has for my department, for my business, and really help bring data to the conversation. For now though, I hope you've enjoyed that. So stay safe, take care, ta-da.